Many people misunderstand the idea of pulling back. They believe that stepping away from someone's attention, from their constant presence, or from their emotional demands is a form of rejection. They fear it will push the person away, make them lose interest, or cause distance that cannot be repaired. Yet, this belief is rooted in confusion between self-abandonment and self-alignment. Pulling back is not about withdrawal from love. It is not about turning your heart cold or guarding it as if it were fragile. It is not a strategy to manipulate, coerce, or test someone. It is a conscious return to yourself, a reclamation of your energy, your attention, and your center. When a person becomes entangled in attachment, in the desire to be seen, chosen, or validated by another, they often lose themselves in the process. They measure their worth against the frequency of messages, the intensity of affection, or the consistency of attention. They sacrifice their own rhythm for another's schedule, their own boundaries for another's comfort, and their own peace for the illusion of control over someone else's feelings. This is not love. It is surrender. It is exhaustion disguised as devotion. And the more a person surrenders themselves in this way, the less power they have to truly connect. Pulling back, however, is the opposite of surrender. It is a conscious act of returning to your own life, your own priorities, and your own presence. It is the recognition that you are already complete, that your happiness is not contingent upon someone else's consistency, that your value does not rise or fall based on their attention. When you pull back, you create a sacred space around yourself. It is a space where your thoughts, your desires, and your emotional energy are no longer borrowed from someone who may or may not meet your expectations, but fully owned by you. This ownership is magnetic because it communicates without words that you are grounded, whole, and untouchable by need. To understand why this works, one must recognize a fundamental truth: love is not scarcity, and desire is not obligation. When a person senses that you are dependent on them for your emotional equilibrium, the natural rhythm of attraction is broken. The tension that gives desire its vitality disappears. There is no pursuit when one feels trapped. There is only responsibility. There is no longing when presence is demanded. There is only fatigue. Pulling back restores the natural balance. It removes pressure and replaces it with presence, not need. It does not reject love. It allows love to return to its authentic form. Returning to self also involves honoring your own boundaries. Many people fear setting limits because they imagine it will create distance. Yet, boundaries are not walls. They are signals of clarity. They communicate what you can give, what you cannot compromise, and where your attention belongs. They are the framework within which authentic connection can thrive. Pulling back is an expression of these boundaries, a gentle but firm declaration that your life, your energy, and your peace are not negotiable. And when boundaries are established from a place of self-respect rather than fear, they are magnetic rather than alienating. There is also a profound internal shift that occurs when you pull back. By stepping away from the constant need to monitor, respond, or adjust, you reconnect with your inner voice. You hear your desires more clearly, see your priorities more vividly, and feel your emotions without the distortion of anxiety or expectation. You begin to understand the distinction between love and attachment, desire and dependency, presence and insistence. You learn that giving too much, too soon, or too often is not generosity, it is exhaustion. And by returning to yourself, by reclaiming your energy, you cultivate a clarity that cannot be achieved while endlessly chasing someone else's attention. Pulling back also transforms the way others perceive you. When you are fully present within yourself, your actions are no longer reactive, they are intentional. Your absence is not a punishment, it is a reflection of alignment. It communicates that you are someone who cannot be taken for granted, someone whose presence is valued not because it is constant, but because it is earned and freely given. This energy naturally invites attention, respect, and desire. It allows others to step forward of their own volition, rather than out of obligation, guilt, or fear. Desire thrives in freedom, not confinement, and pulling back provides the space in which it can grow organically. Moreover, pulling back nurtures patience and trust. It teaches you to release control over outcomes and to accept the natural flow of connection. You no longer demand proof of affection at every turn. You no longer rely on immediate validation to confirm your worth. Instead, you trust the process of life, the rhythm of relationships, and the intelligence of attraction. This trust is not passive, it is active. It is a choice to focus on your own growth, your own clarity, and your own alignment while allowing the external world to respond in kind. Ultimately, pulling back is an act of self-honoring. It is the recognition that your energy is sacred, your time is valuable, and your heart is worthy of reverence. It is not a manipulation of desire, but a restoration of authenticity. It is not withdrawal from love, but a return to self. In stepping back, you step fully into your own power. You allow yourself to be seen not as a shadow of someone else's expectations, but as a complete, radiant presence. And in this presence, true connection, not forced, not needy, not conditional, emerges naturally. Desire is delicate. It is not something that can be forced, coerced, or demanded. It does not flourish under weight or constraint. Yet, many people attempt to manufacture desire through pressure, through constant pursuit, persistent questioning, or insistent need. They believe that attention can be bought with urgency, that affection can be secured with persistence, and that connection is a matter of persistence rather than presence. What they fail to understand is that desire is the opposite of pressure. Desire grows in space, in the breathing room between two souls, in the moments when each is free to exist fully without compulsion or expectation. Pressure is visible. It is the tension of expectation, the energy of need. It manifests in repeated messages, urgent calls, constant reassurance seeking, and over-investment in outcomes. When pressure dominates, it creates a sense of obligation. The other person feels cornered, tasked, and measured. Their natural curiosity, their organic attraction, their inner pull toward you is suffocated by the demand for proof, attention, and emotional labor. Pressure is not a tool of connection. It is a signal of imbalance, a reflection of attachment rather than alignment. And when a person feels the weight of your need, desire retreats, not because they are unwilling to love, but because love in its purest form is a voluntary offering, not a transaction. Space, on the other hand, is fertile. It is the absence of demand, the presence of freedom, the allowance of mystery. Space does not signal disinterest, it signals completeness. When you create space around yourself, you communicate without words that your happiness, your attention, and your life are not contingent on someone else's validation. You show that your presence is not something to be earned through performance, but something to be experienced naturally, freely, and joyfully. Space is magnetic because it respects the other person's autonomy while preserving your own. It is the environment in which desire can arise naturally, without pressure, without expectation, without force. Human psychology is simple in this sense. Desire emerges when freedom exists. When someone feels pursued out of compulsion, attraction diminishes. When someone feels the weight of expectation, curiosity falters. When someone senses that their presence is required to maintain another's emotional stability, the energy of longing collapses. Desire cannot breathe under demand, and it cannot grow when tension replaces connection. But when space is present, the mind is free to imagine, the heart is free to wander, and the soul is free to return. Space allows the other person to fill in the gaps with their own longing, imagination, and attention. It allows them to desire without guilt, to wonder without pressure, and to step forward because they choose to, not because they must. Creating space is not passive. It is not a withdrawal that stems from fear, avoidance, or rejection. It is an active choice to align with your own energy. It is the decision to honor your own rhythm, your own boundaries, and your own presence while allowing the other person to do the same. Space requires confidence, self-respect, and trust. Trust in the natural ebb and flow of relationships, trust in the intelligence of attraction, and trust in the inherent value of your own being. When space is created from this place, it does not push someone away. It invites them in. It draws them closer, not through compulsion, but through magnetism. Space also cultivates mystery. When someone is constantly available, completely visible, and immediately responsive, they become predictable. Their energy is known, their patterns are mapped, and their essence feels fully explored. Desire wanes in predictability because it thrives on curiosity, imagination, and the unknown. By creating space, you preserve the parts of yourself that cannot be possessed, predicted, or controlled. You allow the other person to wonder about you, to think of you when you are absent, and to feel the pull of your presence more keenly because it is not taken for granted. Mystery is not deception. It is authenticity preserved in its natural rhythm, untouched by the demand to perform or to prove. Pressure and space are polar opposites in energy. Pressure is contraction. Space is expansion. When you pressure someone, you contract their capacity to respond freely. You create obligation guilt or fatigue. When you offer space, you expand the potential for connection, attraction, and desire. This is why pulling back, stepping away, and holding your center are not acts of manipulation, they are acts of alignment. They demonstrate that you understand the laws of attraction, the nature of desire, and the intelligence of the human heart. To give space is to honor not only yourself, but also the other person. It is to acknowledge that love cannot be forced, that attention cannot be demanded, and that desire cannot be manufactured. It is to create the environment in which natural attraction can flourish. And in this environment, desire grows quietly, steadily, and powerfully. It emerges in glances rather than explanations, in absence rather than clinginess, in choice rather than obligation. When you allow space, you allow breathing. You allow curiosity to awaken. You allow longing to take root. You allow the natural rhythm of connection to unfold without interference. You no longer chase, you no longer push, and you no longer need to perform to earn attention. Instead, you exist fully, grounded in yourself, anchored in your presence, and clear in your boundaries. This clarity becomes magnetic. Your energy does not demand, it invites. Your presence does not press, it draws. Your self-possession awakens desire not through force but through freedom. Attachment is a force many mistake for love, believing that closeness, constant presence, or dependence are proof of connection. Yet attachment itself is not love, it is a reflection of need. And when attachment is fueled by fear, it becomes a subtle poison to attraction. Fear creates patterns that unknowingly repel the very energy we wish to invite. It distorts presence, contaminates desire, and undermines the natural flow of connection. Understanding this is essential because the depth of attraction is not determined by intensity of attachment, but by freedom of being and alignment of energy. Fear-driven attachment manifests quietly. It is not always obvious in loud arguments or dramatic gestures. It can appear in the form of overthinking, in repeated questioning, in need for reassurance, in anticipating rejection, or in measuring one's worth through another's responses. Fear whispers, "You must secure them, or you will lose them," and in obedience to this voice, one begins to over-invest. The messages multiply, the calls extend, and the energy becomes heavy, not light. A mind clouded by fear projects urgency where patience would create attraction. The heart clings where presence would inspire longing, and the very act meant to deepen connection becomes the force that diminishes it. When attachment is driven by fear, it signals to the other person that your center is elsewhere. They sense the imbalance, the energy of dependence, the invisible weight of expectation. Humans are not drawn to weight, they are drawn to vitality. When someone perceives that your emotional stability hinges on their behavior, desire begins to shrink, replaced by the subtle tension of responsibility. They feel compelled rather than inspired. The natural rhythm of attraction, which thrives on curiosity, autonomy, and choice, is replaced by the tension of obligation and pressure. Fear-driven attachment does not attract. It binds, suffocates, and diminishes the sense of mystery that desire requires to flourish. Attachment rooted in fear also erodes self-respect. When we attach from a place of insecurity, we prioritize the other person's attention over our own integrity. We over-explain, over-justify, and over-adapt. We sacrifice boundaries to ensure acceptance. In doing so, we lose alignment with ourselves, and desire is intricately tied to alignment. Attraction does not emerge from self-abandonment. It emerges from clarity, from presence, from the awareness that one's value is inherent and not contingent upon external validation. Fear-driven attachment removes this clarity, replacing it with anxiety, which can be felt subtly yet powerfully by the other person. The energy becomes heavy, and heavy energy does not invite longing. It repels it. Ironically, fear-driven attachment often seeks control, while simultaneously desiring freedom from uncertainty. This contradiction creates tension that manifests as inconsistency. One moment we appear available, the next we withdraw in anxiety. We oscillate between pursuit and detachment, never steady, never grounded. Humans respond to rhythm, to consistency, and to presence that is both autonomous and engaged. When attachment is driven by fear, the rhythm is fractured. The energy becomes unpredictable, not magnetic. Desire, which thrives on anticipation and curiosity, cannot flourish in chaos of inconsistency born from insecurity. Fear-driven attachment also clouds perception. We begin to interpret neutral behaviors as rejection or indifference. A delayed message becomes evidence of abandonment. A casual comment is magnified into a sign of disinterest. These projections born from fear create emotional turbulence that contaminates communication and interaction. The person on the receiving end senses the distortion, the need that is disguised as love, the anxiety disguised as care, and instinctively pulls back, not because they wish to, but because the energy is unbalanced. Fear disrupts desire by turning authentic connection into a performance of reassurance. Breaking free from fear-driven attachment requires a return to self. It requires acknowledging that attraction cannot be manufactured by compulsion, that love cannot be earned by anxiety, and that presence must be chosen freely to be compelling. When you cultivate self-reliance, emotional sovereignty, and inner stability, attachment transforms from a tether of need into a dance of mutual desire. Presence becomes magnetic because it is voluntary, not coercive. Connection becomes fluid because it is free, not pressured. Desire, in its pure form, thrives when attachment is rooted in alignment rather than fear. The liberation from fear-driven attachment also fosters patience and trust. We learn to release control over outcomes, to let the natural flow of connection unfold without interference. We begin to observe rather than react, to allow space rather than fill it with anxiety. In this state, attraction is no longer a product of chasing. It becomes a reflection of the energy we carry, the self-possession we embody, and the confidence we radiate. The other person is drawn not because they are required to stay, but because they are invited to choose freely. Finally, fear-driven attachment distorts the perception of love itself. It equates presence with devotion, attention with worth, and reassurance with commitment. But true love is not measured by quantity, intensity, or need. It is measured by freedom, authenticity, and alignment. Attachment rooted in fear is a mirror of insecurity, not a reflection of desire. When we shift attachment from fear to self-alignment, attraction is restored. Desire is awakened in space, in autonomy, in curiosity. It is not forced, it is invited. It is not coerced, it is magnetized. Presence is one of the most subtle yet profound forces in human connection. It is not merely the act of being physically there, of responding immediately, or of constantly demonstrating attention. Presence is energy, awareness, and intention aligned with self-possession. Yet, in many relationships, presence is confused with availability. People assume that constant accessibility equates to love, loyalty, or devotion, and they believe that if they can maintain continuous visibility, they will secure the other person's desire. But this assumption is flawed. Presence becomes powerful not when it is demanded, coerced, or performed out of fear. It becomes powerful when it is freely chosen. When presence is chosen, it emanates from a place of self-sovereignty. It communicates that your energy, your attention, and your time are valuable, not disposable. There is no compulsion, no desperation, no anxiety that seeks to prove worthiness. Instead, there is intention, clarity, and alignment. To be present by choice is to say, without words, that your attention is a gift, that your energy is not taken for granted, and that your participation in the relationship is voluntary. This voluntary quality is magnetic because it activates desire, curiosity, and appreciation in the other person. When presence is demanded, however, the opposite occurs. It communicates insecurity, dependence, and neediness, which paradoxically diminishes attraction rather than increasing it. Demanded presence often manifests subtly. It can appear in the form of repeated messages, excessive checking in, or constant reassurance seeking. It can emerge as subtle manipulation, as when attention is withheld to provoke a reaction, or when proximity is forced to validate connection. Even when these behaviors are unconscious, they carry an energetic signature that is perceptible to the other person. Humans are sensitive to energy. They can feel desperation, compulsion, and anxiety even when the words convey love or care. And when presence is perceived as demanded rather than freely given, desire diminishes because it is no longer an experience of choice. It becomes an obligation. When presence is chosen, it carries weight without pressure. It demonstrates autonomy and balance. It reflects a self that is complete, whole, and centered. There is no need to over-explain or justify every action, no need to perform to earn acknowledgement, and no compulsion to maintain constant alignment with the other person's schedule or emotional state. In this state, presence is not a transaction. It is not a series of actions designed to elicit approval. It is a natural flow of energy that arises from alignment with self. The other person experiences it as effortless, magnetic, And rare because true presence is not something that can be replicated under obligation. It is an act of conscious generosity, not unconscious compulsion. Presence that is chosen also preserves mystery and curiosity. When someone is always available, always present, always predictable, their energy becomes expected, mundane, and ordinary. Desire thrives on anticipation, imagination, and voluntary engagement. It flourishes when the other person has the space to wonder, to reflect, and to seek your energy because they are drawn by choice, not necessity. When presence is freely given, the energy shifts from obligation to invitation. The absence of compulsion creates a field in which desire can grow naturally, without pressure, without manipulation, and without distortion. This principle also strengthens boundaries. When presence is chosen, it is clear where your energy belongs and where it does not. Boundaries are not walls, they are signals of self-respect, clarity, and alignment. They communicate what is acceptable, what is sacred, and what is non-negotiable. When boundaries are held consciously and with integrity, presence gains depth and weight. It is no longer scattered, diluted, or reactive. It is concentrated, intentional, and valuable. And when presence is experienced as valuable, it awakens a profound sense of respect and longing in the other person because it is rare, deliberate, and grounded. Choosing presence also cultivates patience and trust. It requires faith in the natural rhythm of relationships, in the intelligence of attraction, and in the autonomy of the other person. It is the understanding that attention cannot be coerced, desire cannot be forced, and love cannot be secured through anxiety. When presence is chosen, it creates a sense of ease, freedom, and flow. It allows both individuals to engage from authenticity rather than obligation, to contribute from fullness rather than lack, and to connect without compulsion or control. The power of chosen presence extends beyond romantic relationships. It applies to friendships, family dynamics, and professional interactions. In all contexts, people respond to energy that is freely offered rather than extracted. They are drawn to those who stand in their own power, who engage with intention, and who participate consciously. This energy is magnetic because it communicates self-possession, stability, and integrity. It is attractive because it does not demand, yet it invites. It does not chase, yet it beckons. It does not cling, yet it is unforgettable. Ultimately, presence becomes powerful when it is chosen because it reflects a deeper truth, that connection cannot be manufactured through compulsion, that love cannot survive under pressure, and that desire cannot flourish in an environment of need. When presence is chosen, it communicates abundance rather than scarcity, freedom rather than constraint, and integrity rather than insecurity. It creates a space in which attraction can grow naturally, organically, and powerfully. Presence chosen is presence that is felt, desired, and remembered because it is authentic, intentional, and aligned with the self. Self-respect is one of the most overlooked yet most potent forces in human relationships. It is not merely a concept or an idea, it is an energy, a presence, a way of inhabiting your own life that communicates value without words. When self-respect is embodied, it creates what can be called emotional gravity, a force that draws others in, not through need, manipulation, or compulsion, but through the undeniable power of alignment, integrity, and self-possession. This gravity is subtle yet palpable. It is felt long before it is seen, understood before it is explained, and experienced long before it is articulated. Many people confuse attention with respect. They believe that if they are constantly available, constantly accommodating, constantly prioritizing someone else, they are demonstrating worth. They believe that their value is proven through sacrifice, adaptation, and compliance. Yet, this is the opposite of self-respect. When we give ourselves away to maintain another's approval, we dilute our energy. We send signals of need, insecurity, and dependence. Emotional gravity is not generated through such giving. It arises when we honor ourselves, maintain boundaries, and cultivate a sense of worth that is independent of external validation. Self-respect begins with clarity. It is the recognition that your time, your energy, your emotions, and your presence are not commodities to be exchanged for attention or affection. They are extensions of your being, sacred and irreplaceable. When you act from this clarity, every choice, every interaction, every word carries weight. You no longer bend to every request, overextend yourself, or over-explain your actions. You choose intentionally where to invest your attention, when to speak, and how to engage. This intentionality creates a force field around your presence, a gravity that naturally attracts respect, curiosity, and desire. People instinctively respond to those who are anchored in self-possession rather than those who drift in pursuit of approval. Boundaries are an essential expression of self-respect. When we hold boundaries, we communicate without words what is acceptable, what is sacred, and what is non-negotiable. Boundaries are not walls, they are signals of alignment. They show that your life is organized around principles, not panic, priorities, not compulsion, and integrity, not fear. Emotional gravity grows from boundaries because they create tension in the right places, mystery where curiosity is needed, and respect where previously there was indifference. When boundaries are ignored or compromised, we lose power. When boundaries are maintained from a place of self-respect, we gain force. Self-respect also transforms the way we engage with others emotionally. When our attachment is driven by insecurity or need, we offer energy that is scattered, desperate, or reactive. We attempt to manipulate attention or affection through over-investment, fear, or overcompensation. But when self-respect guides our engagement, our energy is focused, intentional, and grounded. We do not overreact to perceived slights. We do not demand reassurance. We do not attempt to control outcomes. Instead, we interact from a space of fullness, presence, and alignment. This shift in energy is immediately noticeable. People feel it. They sense the difference between desperation and self-possession, between need and value, between compulsion and choice. Emotional gravity is born in this distinction. Another aspect of self-respect is emotional sovereignty, the ability to manage one's own inner life without making another person responsible for it. Those who lack self-respect often project their anxieties, insecurities, and fears onto others, creating pressure and imbalance. Emotional gravity emerges when a person owns their internal state, when they do not rely on others for validation or reassurance, and when they maintain composure regardless of external circumstances. This energy communicates strength, stability, and authenticity. It draws people naturally because attraction is drawn to confidence, not chaos to alignment, not dependency to integrity, not negotiation. Self-respect also fosters patience. It allows the natural rhythm of relationships to unfold without interference. When you respect yourself, you do not chase, manipulate, or force connection. You understand that authentic relationships cannot be manufactured through compulsion or need. You allow time for desire, curiosity, and attraction to grow organically. You allow the other person to choose you freely rather than out of obligation. This patience amplifies emotional gravity because it communicates that your presence is not desperate, your energy is not borrowed, and your attention is not available for bargaining. Moreover, self-respect creates clarity in choice. When you respect yourself, you do not settle for less than what aligns with your standards, values, and principles. You do not compromise your integrity for temporary validation or fleeting attention. This clarity is magnetic. People are drawn to those who stand firm, who know their worth, and who do not bend for approval. Emotional gravity emerges because those who respect themselves radiate stability, certainty, and inner power, qualities that are rare and irresistible in a world dominated by insecurity and neediness. In the presence of self-respect, attraction shifts from quantity to quality. Attention is no longer begged for, it is earned naturally. Desire is no longer manufactured through fear or anxiety, it emerges organically from the recognition of value. Connection is no longer reactive or transactional, it is chosen, mutual, and alive. Emotional gravity is not a product of effort, manipulation, or force. It is the natural consequence of alignment, integrity, and self-possession. When a person embodies self-respect, their energy resonates. It does not scream for attention, it invites it. It does not demand compliance, it inspires choice. It does not chase approval, it earns reverence. Emotional gravity is not learned, it is cultivated through the consistent practice of honoring oneself, maintaining boundaries, and engaging with intention. Those who experience it cannot help but feel drawn, but not because they are compelled, but because they recognize something rare, complete, and whole in the other person. There is a paradox in human attraction that many fail to recognize. The very act of chasing often repels, while the absence of pursuit creates longing. What is not chased is often pursued, not because the other person is cruel or indifferent, but because desire is fueled by choice, freedom, and the natural rhythm of emotional energy. When someone feels that they are constantly pursued, their need to invest effort diminishes. They do not experience the thrill of wanting, the tension of anticipation, or the satisfaction of voluntarily stepping forward. In contrast, when a person exists with grounded presence, aligned energy, and a refusal to compromise self-respect in the name of connection, the other is drawn to them, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity, attraction, and desire. Chasing is born from lack. It emerges when a person feels incomplete without external validation, when they believe that their happiness depends on the attention, approval, or affection of another. This energy is palpable. It manifests in messages that come too quickly, calls that are too frequent, and gestures that attempt to secure presence or commitment. It is desperate, urgent, and heavy. When this energy meets another person, it often triggers a subtle, unconscious response: retreat. Desire cannot thrive in a vacuum of pressure. When someone is chased, they feel obligation before attraction, duty before curiosity. The natural tension that creates pursuit collapses because the need is already projected outward, leaving no space for longing to grow. The energy of non-chasing is fundamentally different. It is grounded, calm, and self-contained. It communicates that your value is inherent, that your energy is finite, and that your attention is not available as a means of control or validation. When you do not chase, you are not passive or indifferent, you are aligned. You are choosing yourself first, honoring your boundaries, and living fully within your own energy. This presence, this self-possession, creates a magnetic force. People are drawn to it because it reflects a truth they recognize intuitively. Desire thrives on freedom, curiosity, and choice. When energy is offered freely and voluntarily, it becomes compelling. Non-chasing also allows for mystery to flourish. Desire is fueled by the unknown. When someone is fully visible at all times, fully available at all moments, and fully predictable in behavior, the spark of curiosity fades. Anticipation, imagination, and longing require absence. They require energy that is not demanded, attention that is not coerced, and presence that is felt as a gift rather than an expectation. When you stop chasing, you create the space in which this natural attraction can grow. Your absence is not rejection. It is a pause that allows the other person to notice, reflect, and desire. It is the field in which pursuit is born organically. There is also a subtle power in allowing the other person to step forward voluntarily. When someone is pursued relentlessly, they unconsciously assume control over the dynamic. They hold the power because the energy has been ceded to them. They do not need to invest themselves. The effort is already being expended on their behalf. But when chasing stops, when energy is returned to the self, the natural polarity is restored. The other person feels the weight of their own choice. They begin to invest not because they are compelled, but because they want to. They step forward out of genuine desire rather than obligation, and the pursuit that emerges in this context is real, compelling, and deeply magnetic. Choosing not to chase is also an expression of self, respect, and boundaries. It communicates that your time, attention, and emotional energy are valuable, and that they will not be given indiscriminately. This clarity of energy is attractive because it reflects integrity, strength, and self-possession. The other person senses that they are encountering someone who cannot be taken for granted, someone whose presence is rare and valuable. Desire is awakened not through pressure, but through recognition of worth. When energy is returned to the self, the dynamic shifts. The person who once held little investment now feels compelled to step forward. The one who was previously passive begins to pursue. What was ignored or assumed is now desired because the balance of energy has changed. Non-chasing also cultivates emotional maturity. It requires patience, trust, and confidence in the natural unfolding of relationships. It requires faith that connection does not need to be forced, that desire cannot be manufactured, and that attraction thrives when energy flows freely. This emotional sovereignty is itself magnetic. People are drawn to those who are whole, grounded, and aligned, not to those who are needy, reactive, or anxious. When you refuse to chase, you demonstrate that you are complete, that your happiness is not contingent on their presence, and that your energy is not available for bargaining or validation. This energy creates a gravitational pull that cannot be manufactured. It emerges naturally from self-possession. Finally, what is not chased is often pursued because desire is rooted in freedom, not obligation. The human heart is drawn to choice, not compulsion, to curiosity, not predictability, to energy that is voluntary, not coerced. When you stop chasing, you restore polarity, you preserve mystery, and you allow desire to emerge in its most natural form. The pursuit that arises from this energy is not hollow or forced, it is genuine, intentional, and powerful. By returning your attention and energy to yourself, by stepping into self-alignment and integrity, you create the conditions in which longing grows, curiosity awakens, and pursuit becomes inevitable, natural, and compelling.